What if I told you that you could never lose again? Not through some magical thinking or empty motivation, but through a philosophical approach that's been tested for over 2,000 years. This isn't about participation trophies or lowering your standards. It's about something far more powerful. Becoming genuinely invincible in every situation life throws at you. We live in a world obsessed with winning. From the moment we wake up, we're competing for that promotion, competing for attention on social media, competing in relationships, even competing in traffic just to get to work. And here's what's killing us. We're terrified of losing. That fear of failure keeps us up at night, makes our hands shake before big presentations, and turns every interaction into a high-stakes game we might lose. But what if the entire game is rigged? What if the way we think about winning and losing is fundamentally flawed? The ancient Stoic philosopher Epictetus discovered something revolutionary about human nature and competition. He taught his students a principle so counterintuitive that it sounds absurd at first. If you want to lose, you always win. This isn't wordplay or philosophical gymnastics. It's a practical approach that can transform your relationship with success, failure, and everything in between. Think about the last time you were afraid to fail. Maybe it was asking someone out, going for that job interview, or starting that business. What if that fear simply disappeared? What if you could walk into any situation with complete confidence, knowing that no matter what happens, you've already won? Over the next few sections, we're going to explore exactly how this works. You'll discover why your fear of losing is actually making you lose more often. Learn from ancient stories that mirror our modern struggles, and most importantly, develop a mindset that makes you unstoppable. We'll look at real people who've used these principles to transform their lives, from anxious performers to successful entrepreneurs who credit their success to embracing failure. This isn't just ancient philosophy gathering dust in old books. It's a living, breathing approach to life that's more relevant today than ever. In our hyper-competitive, anxiety-driven world, the Stoic secret to never losing isn't just helpful, it's essential. By the end of this video, you'll understand how to flip the script on failure, turn your biggest fears into your greatest strengths, and yes, learn how to never truly lose again. The beauty of this approach is its simplicity. You don't need years of meditation, expensive courses, or natural talent. You just need to understand a few key principles that the Stoics discovered centuries ago and learn how to apply them to your modern life. Whether you're struggling with performance anxiety, fear of rejection, or the constant pressure to succeed, these teachings offer a way out of the trap. The journey starts with understanding why we're so afraid of losing in the first place. 1. Why your fear of losing is making you lose. You're sitting in your car outside the office building, hands gripping the steering wheel. In 15 minutes, you have the biggest interview of your life. Your mind races through every possible disaster, stumbling over words, forgetting your achievements, that awkward silence when they ask about your weaknesses. Your heart pounds harder with each imagined failure. By the time you walk through those doors, you're already defeated. Not by the interviewers, but by your own fear of losing. This scenario plays out millions of times every day across America. In Chicago boardrooms, Los Angeles auditions, New York dating scenes, and everywhere in between. We're so terrified of losing that we sabotage ourselves before we even begin. But here's what Epictetus understood that we've forgotten. The fear of losing is often more destructive than losing itself. The ancient Stoic philosopher identified a fundamental flaw in how we approach life's competitions. He taught that we trap ourselves in what I call the binary prison. Either we win or we lose, success or failure, acceptance or rejection. This black and white thinking creates a psychological pressure cooker where half of all possible outcomes lead to misery. When you frame life this way, you're essentially flipping a coin with your happiness. But it gets worse. Epictetus pointed out that when we desperately want to win, we place our well-being in the hands of forces beyond our control. Think about what winning usually requires. Other people's approval, favorable circumstances, good timing, sometimes just plain luck. You could prepare perfectly for that interview, give brilliant answers, and still lose to someone's nephew who knows the CEO. You could train for months for a marathon and twist your ankle on race day. You could craft the perfect dating profile and get ghosted anyway. Here's where Epictetus drops the truth bomb that changed everything for his students. By desiring outcomes outside our control, we voluntarily enslave ourselves to anxiety. Every time you think, "I need this to go well," you're handing over your peace of mind to external forces. It's like giving someone else the remote control to your emotions and hoping they'll pick a channel you like. Consider what happens in your body when you're afraid of losing. Your muscles tense, your breathing becomes shallow, and your mind clouds with worst-case scenarios. Athletes call it choking. Performers call it stage fright. But Epictetus called it what it really is: self-inflicted suffering caused by wanting something you can't guarantee. The fear doesn't help you win. In fact, studies show that anxiety about failure directly impairs performance. Your fear of losing literally makes you more likely to lose. Let me share a modern example that would have made Epictetus nod knowingly. Sarah, a software engineer in Seattle, was paralyzed by her fear of failing technical interviews. She'd study for weeks, know the material cold, but freeze up the moment she faced the whiteboard. Her fear of looking stupid made her look, well, stupid. She'd fumble through problems she could solve in her sleep, her mind blank with panic. The cruel irony is that the more we fear losing, the more we have to lose. When you're terrified of rejection, every interaction becomes a high-stakes gamble. When you're afraid of failure, every opportunity becomes a threat. You start playing not to lose instead of playing to play. And that defensive, fear-based approach virtually guarantees the outcome you're trying to avoid. Epictetus observed this pattern in his students constantly. They'd come to him anxious about upcoming events, public speeches, meetings with powerful people, competitive examinations. He'd ask them a simple question: what exactly do you want from this situation? Invariably, they wanted something outside their control. They wanted applause, approval, victory over others, and specific outcomes that depended on external factors. This is where the Stoic understanding becomes practical gold for modern life. When you're afraid of losing a job interview, what do you really want? You want the interviewers to choose you, but their decision depends on their preferences, their other options, their mood that day, company politics, budget constraints, and 100 other factors you can't control. No wonder you're anxious. You've staked your happiness on something as unpredictable as the weather in April. The fear of losing creates a vicious cycle. You want to win, which makes you afraid of losing, which makes you anxious, which impairs your performance, which makes you more likely to lose, which reinforces your fear. It's a self-fulfilling prophecy that Epictetus watched destroy countless lives. Students who could have been great orators remained silent. Talented individuals sabotaged their own success, all because they were trapped in the binary prison of win or lose. But what if there was another way? What if you could compete without fear, perform without anxiety, and face any challenge with unshakable confidence? Epictetus didn't just diagnose the problem. He offered a solution that seems almost too simple to work. Yet it transformed the lives of his students and continues to transform lives today. The key lies in understanding what's truly yours to control and what isn't. Your preparation, your effort, your attitude, your choices, these belong to you. The outcome, other people's decisions, external results, these were never yours to control in the first place. When you stop trying to control the uncontrollable, something magical happens. The fear dissolves. This isn't about not caring or giving up. It's about redirecting your energy from anxious worry about outcomes to focused attention on your performance. It's the difference between a pianist worrying about applause and a pianist lost in the music. One creates anxiety, the other creates excellence. In essence, your fear of losing is making you lose because it diverts your attention from what you can control to what you can't. It's like trying to drive while staring at the rearview mirror. You're so worried about what might go wrong that you create the very disaster you're trying to avoid. Building on this understanding, let's examine how Epictetus helped one particular student overcome this destructive pattern. 2. The musician who couldn't stop shaking, and what Epictetus taught him. In one of his most memorable lectures, Epictetus told his students about a talented musician who came to him with a peculiar problem. This man could play his lyre beautifully in the privacy of his home, his fingers dancing across the strings with effortless grace. But the moment he stepped onto a stage, everything changed. His hands trembled, his face turned pale, and sweat dripped down his forehead. The music that flowed so naturally in solitude became forced and clumsy in front of an audience. Sound familiar? Replace the ancient lyre with a PowerPoint presentation, a first-date conversation, or a crucial sales pitch, and you have the modern epidemic of performance anxiety. Whether it's a musician in ancient Rome or a marketing manager in modern Miami, the symptoms are identical. Competence destroyed by the fear of judgment. Epictetus, never one to offer empty comfort, got straight to the heart of the matter. He asked the musician a series of probing questions. Did he lack skill? No, he practiced for hours daily. Did he not know the music? He could play it with his eyes closed. Was the instrument faulty? The same lyre sang beautifully at home. So what changed when he faced an audience? The answer was devastatingly simple: desire. In private, the musician desired only to play music. On stage, he desired applause, admiration, and approval. He wanted the audience to think he was talented, sophisticated, worthy of their time. And because he wanted something he couldn't control, their opinion, he opened the door to fear. After all, what if they didn't approve? What if they found him lacking? What if they laughed or, worse, yawned? Epictetus explained to his students that the musician's trembling wasn't caused by a lack of skill, but by a fundamental misunderstanding of what belonged to him. His performance belonged to him. The audience's reaction belonged to them. By desiring their reaction, he was essentially trying to control other people's minds, a futile endeavor that could only lead to anxiety. Think about this in your own life. Remember the last time you had to speak in a meeting, post something important on social media, or meet your partner's parents for the first time. Were you nervous about your ability to speak, type, or have dinner? Of course not. You were nervous about how others would receive you. Like the ancient musician, you wanted something outside your control. The philosopher used this example to illustrate a broader principle. We suffer not from our actions but from our desires for specific outcomes. The musician's fingers knew exactly what to do. His anxiety came from wanting the audience to respond in a particular way. He had enslaved his peace of mind to the whims of strangers. Let me translate this to a scene that plays out every day in modern America. Jessica, a talented graphic designer in Portland, creates stunning work in her home studio. But when presenting to clients, she becomes a different person. Her voice shakes, she second-guesses every design choice, and she undercuts her own expertise with constant apologies. Why? Because she's not just presenting designs. She's desperately seeking validation. She wants the clients to love her work, respect her talent, and choose her proposal. The weight of these desires crushes her natural confidence. Epictetus would have recognized Jessica's struggle immediately. Like his trembling musician, she's made herself miserable by wanting something that was never hers to control. Client reactions depend on their taste, budget, mood, what they had for breakfast, their relationship with their boss, and countless other factors that Jessica can't influence. By wanting their approval so desperately, she's given them power over her emotional state. The Stoic philosopher didn't just diagnose the problem. He offered a radical solution. He told the musician to perform for the sake of performing, not for applause. Play the music because the music deserves to be played well, not because you want people to think you're talented. Focus entirely on what's yours, the preparation, the technique, the expression through your instrument. Let the audience have what's theirs, their opinions, reactions, and judgments. This might sound like philosophical idealism, but it's intensely practical. When the musician stops worrying about applause and focuses solely on his performance, several things happen. First, the trembling stops because there's no longer anything to fear. If you don't need their approval, their disapproval can't hurt you. Second, paradoxically, the performance improves because all that mental energy wasted on worry can now flow into the music itself. Modern psychology has validated what Epictetus knew intuitively. Performance anxiety stems from what researchers call evaluation apprehension, the fear of being judged. When we focus on evaluation, what others think, our performance suffers. When we focus on the task itself, we enter what athletes call the zone or flow state. The ancient Stoics had a different name for it: wisdom. Consider how this applies to everyday situations. You're about to text someone you're interested in romantically. If you're focused on getting a specific response of them liking you back, agreeing to a date, validating your worth, you'll agonize over every word. You'll write and rewrite, second-guess every emoji, and check your phone obsessively for their reply. But if you focus only on expressing yourself honestly and kindly, the anxiety evaporates. You've done your part. Their response is their business. Epictetus used the musician's story to teach a fundamental truth. We create our own suffering by desiring what isn't ours. The musician at home was free because he wanted only to play well, something entirely within his control. The musician on stage was enslaved because he wanted applause, something entirely outside his control. Same person, same skill, different desire, completely different experience. This principle extends far beyond performance situations. Every time we make our happiness contingent on external validation, we become like that trembling musician. Whether it's seeking likes on Instagram, approval from your boss, or acceptance from your peers, the pattern is identical. You take something beautiful and natural, your creativity, work, or authentic self, and corrupt it with the need for others' approval. The musician's story also reveals why talented people often struggle more with performance anxiety than mediocre ones. The talented know they have something valuable to offer, which makes them more invested in others' reactions. They have more to lose, or so they think. But Epictetus would argue they have nothing to lose because the approval was never theirs to begin with. What happened to the musician after learning this lesson? Epictetus doesn't tell us, but he does share stories of other students who internalized this teaching. They didn't become careless or indifferent. Instead, they became powerful. When you stop needing others' approval, you paradoxically become more likely to receive it. People are drawn to those who are complete in themselves, who perform from fullness rather than neediness. Ultimately, the trembling musician represents all of us when we forget what's truly ours. His shaking hands are our racing hearts before important conversations. His pale face is our sleepless night before big presentations. His fear is our fear, but his solution can be our solution too. Focus on what you control, release what you don't, and watch the trembling stop. This leads us to an even more dramatic example of how this principle plays out when the stakes involve not just public performance, but power itself. 3. When a king feared a homeless philosopher. Imagine the most powerful person you know. Maybe it's your CEO, a celebrity, or a political figure. Now imagine them being nervous about meeting someone who owns nothing but the clothes on their back. Sounds impossible, right? Yet this is exactly what happened when King Antigonus of Macedonia prepared to meet Zeno of Citium, the founder of Stoicism. Epictetus loved telling this story to his students because it flipped every conventional idea about power on its head. Here was Antigonus, a king who commanded armies, controlled vast wealth, and held the power of life and death over thousands. Yet he spent days anxiously preparing for his meeting with Zeno, a philosopher who owned virtually nothing and wanted even less. The king's servants reported that their master changed his outfit multiple times, rehearsed conversations in his mirror, and even consulted advisors about the best way to impress the philosopher. Meanwhile, Zeno went about his usual routine, teaching in the marketplace, completely unconcerned about the upcoming royal visit. When told the king wanted to meet him, Zeno simply nodded and continued his lecture. This reversal of anxiety reveals a profound truth about human nature that's as relevant in modern Atlanta as it was in ancient Macedonia. The person who wants something from the interaction is always at a disadvantage. The person who wants nothing is invincible. And what did King Antigonus want? He wanted Zeno to think well of him, to be impressed by his wisdom and culture, to validate his worth beyond mere political power. Think about your own life. Have you ever been nervous about meeting someone important? Maybe it was a job interview with a senior executive, a date with someone you found incredibly attractive, or meeting a famous person you admired. That flutter in your stomach, that careful consideration of what to wear and say, that's you being King Antigonus, giving away your power to someone who probably isn't thinking about you at all. Epictetus explained to his students why the king was afraid and the philosopher was not. Zeno valued only what was truly his. his judgment, his virtue, his choices. These things couldn't be touched by any external power, not even by a king. What could Antigonus do to him? Throw him in prison. Zeno would philosophize with the guards. Take his possessions? He had none he was attached to. Threaten his life? Zeno didn't fear death because he understood it as a natural transition, not an evil. On the other hand, Antigonus valued something that wasn't his to control, Zeno's opinion. And because the king wanted something he couldn't command, something that belonged entirely to another person's judgment, he made himself vulnerable. All his armies couldn't conquer Zeno's mind. All his gold couldn't purchase genuine respect. His political power was useless in the realm of personal impression. Let me bring this ancient dynamic into a modern context. David, a successful venture capitalist in San Francisco, told me about meeting a janitor who changed his perspective on power. David was used to entrepreneurs pitching him desperately, hanging on his every word, laughing too hard at his jokes. But this janitor, Marcus, treated him exactly the same as everyone else, with simple courtesy and zero additional deference. When David tried to impress Marcus with stories of his deals and connections, the janitor listened politely but showed no special interest. When David mentioned the famous people he knew, Marcus just nodded and continued mopping. It drove David crazy. Here was someone who didn't care about his money, his influence, or his network. And paradoxically, this made David desperate for Marcus's approval. He found himself going out of his way to chat with the janitor, trying different approaches to earn his respect. David had become King Antigonus, and Marcus was playing the role of Zeno without even knowing it. The janitor wasn't trying to be philosophical or make a point. He simply didn't value what David was offering because he was complete in himself. He had his job, his family, his simple pleasures, and that was enough. David's millions meant nothing to him beyond polite human interest. This dynamic plays out everywhere, every day. The person who needs the relationship less has more power in it. The employee who's willing to walk away negotiates better than the one who desperately needs the job. The romantic partner who's secure in themselves doesn't suffer from jealousy and neediness. The social media user who posts for self-expression rather than likes enjoys the platform instead of being enslaved by it. Epictetus drove this lesson home with a series of penetrating questions. Do you know what makes a good person good and a bad person bad? Do you understand the standards by which humans should judge each other? Have you considered that someone's opinion of you might say more about them than about you? These questions exposed the absurdity of seeking approval from others when we don't even know if their judgment is worth respecting. The meeting between Antigonus and Zeno, when it finally happened, was anticlimactic by conventional standards but profound in its implications. The king tried to impress the philosopher with tours of his palace, displays of his wealth, and demonstrations of his power. Zeno responded to everything with the same calm interest he might show to a child's collection of pretty rocks. Not dismissive, but not impressed either. When Antigonus finally asked Zeno what he thought of all he'd seen, the philosopher replied that he'd observed a man who happened to be born into circumstances that gave him control over external things, but who seemed to have no more control over himself than any common person ruled by their desires and fears. The king had everything except the one thing that mattered: self-mastery. This story terrified and inspired Epictetus' students in equal measure. Terrified because they recognized themselves in the anxious king, constantly seeking validation from others. Inspired because they saw in Zeno a model of what they could become: complete, self-sufficient, impossible to intimidate or diminish. The practical applications for modern life are endless. Next time you're nervous about meeting someone important, ask yourself, what do I want from this person that I don't already have? If it's their approval, respect, or validation, you've already lost. You've made yourself a beggar, no matter how well-dressed or successful you appear. But if you want nothing from them except perhaps the pleasure of genuine human connection, you approach them as an equal, no matter the difference in your bank accounts or social status. Zeno's power came not from not caring about others. He was known for his kindness and engagement with all people. His power came from not needing anything from others for his own sense of worth. He enjoyed people without needing them to complete him. He engaged with the king as he would with anyone else, with curiosity about another human being, but without any agenda for personal gain. The lesson Epictetus wanted his students to understand was simple but revolutionary. The moment you need someone else's approval, you've enslaved yourself to them. The moment you're complete in yourself, you're free, whether you're a king or a janitor, a CEO or an intern, a celebrity or completely unknown. Therefore, true power doesn't come from what you control externally, but from what you don't need from others internally. Antigonus had a kingdom but was enslaved by his need for approval. Zeno had nothing but was free because he needed nothing. In our modern world of social hierarchies and status anxiety, this ancient lesson offers a path to genuine confidence. Stop trying to impress others and start impressing yourself with your own virtue and self-mastery. This understanding of power leads us directly to a radical reimagining of competition itself. For how to win every competition without competing. Here's a radical thought. What if you could win every competition you enter by simply refusing to compete? Not by dropping out or giving up, but by redefining what competition means in the first place. Epictetus taught his students this paradoxical approach, and it remains one of the most powerful tools for succeeding in our hyper-competitive world. Consider what happens in your mind when you see something as a competition. Immediately, you create opponents. You establish metrics for winning and losing. You activate your fight or flight response. Your body floods with stress hormones. You narrow your focus to beating others rather than excelling at the task itself. In essence, you voluntarily enter a mental prison where your success is defined by other people's failure. Epictetus observed that we turn everything into a competition, even when no one else is competing. You're at the gym and suddenly you're competing with the person on the next treadmill. You're at work and you're secretly competing with your colleagues for recognition. You're at a party and you're competing for attention and social status. But here's the question Epictetus would ask. Who exactly declared these competitions? Who's keeping score? Let me share a modern example that perfectly illustrates this principle. Rachel, a software developer in Austin, was killing herself trying to be the best programmer on her team. She worked late, skipped lunches, and constantly compared her code commits to her teammates. She saw every code review as a competition, every team meeting as a chance to prove her superiority. The stress was destroying her health and, ironically, her performance. Then Rachel discovered Epictetus's teachings and had a revelation. She wasn't actually in a competition with her teammates. They were all working toward the same goal, building great software. The competition existed only in her mind. Once she realized this, she tried an experiment. For 1 month, she would focus solely on writing the best code she could, helping her teammates when possible, and improving her skills for their own sake. The results were transformative. Without the constant mental drain of competing, her code quality improved dramatically. Without seeing colleagues as opponents, she started learning from them instead of trying to beat them. And here's the kicker: she got promoted. Not because she beat anyone, but because she stopped trying to beat anyone and focused on excellence instead. Epictetus taught that true competition is internal. You're not competing against others. You're competing against your former self. The only meaningful victory is being better today than you were yesterday. The only real defeat is failing to live up to your own potential. Everything else is a distraction that diminishes your power. This doesn't mean becoming passive or lacking ambition. Michael Jordan didn't become great by trying to beat other players. He became great by pushing himself to perfect his craft. The competition with others was incidental. His real competition was with the limits of what was possible in basketball. That's why he remained driven even after winning everything. His true opponent was his own potential. Think about how this applies to everyday situations. You're giving a presentation at work. You could see it as a competition with other presenters, trying to outshine them, worried about looking better or worse by comparison. Or you could see it as an opportunity to communicate your ideas as clearly and effectively as possible. Which approach is more likely to result in a great presentation? Epictetus used a powerful metaphor. Life is like a festival or a play. You've been assigned a role to perform. Your job isn't to have a better role than others or to steal scenes from other actors. Your job is to play your role as excellently as possible. The actor playing the king isn't competing with the actor playing the servant. They're collaborating to create something meaningful. This shift in perspective changes everything about how we approach challenges. Take dating, for example. If you see it as a competition where you need to be chosen over others, every date becomes a high-pressure performance. But if you see it as an opportunity to connect authentically with another human being, the pressure evaporates. You're not trying to win, you're trying to discover. The same applies to social media, that modern arena of constant competition. People drive themselves crazy trying to get more likes, followers, and engagement than others. But Epictetus would ask, what are you really trying to win? When you stop competing for metrics and start sharing authentically, you might get fewer likes, but you'll build genuine connections. Epictetus made a crucial distinction between internal and external competition. External competition is about beating others, which requires their failure for your success. Internal competition is about fulfilling your potential, which requires only your own effort. One enslaves you to circumstances beyond your control. The other liberates you to focus on what you can actually influence. This principle extends to every area of life. In business, companies that focus on beating competitors often lose sight of serving customers. The ones that focus on excellence and innovation end up dominating not because they tried to beat others, but because they tried to perfect their craft. Epictetus warned his students about the trap of comparative success. You might win a competition and feel good, but what have you really won? If your happiness depends on being better than others, you'll need to keep winning to maintain that happiness. And eventually someone will beat you. Then what? Your self-worth crumbles because it was built on the shaky foundation of comparison. But when you compete only with yourself, you can never truly lose. Did you give your best effort? Did you act with integrity? Did you learn and grow? If yes, then you've won, regardless of external outcomes. If no, then you've identified areas for improvement, which is also a form of winning. The practical application is simple but not easy. Next time you feel yourself entering competitive mode, pause and ask, am I competing against others or against my own potential? Shift your attention from external competition to internal excellence, and watch how your performance improves while your stress decreases. In essence, the only competition worth entering is the one you can't lose. The competition to become the person you're capable of being. Everything else is a distraction that enslaves you to forces beyond your control. When you understand this, you don't withdraw from life's challenges, you engage with them more fully, but from a position of strength rather than neediness. This understanding sets the stage for an even more radical principle: the power of wanting to lose. 5. The counterintuitive trick. Why wanting to lose makes you unstoppable. What if I told you that the secret to never losing is to actually want to lose? This sounds like madness, but Epictetus revealed this to be one of the most powerful psychological tools in the Stoic arsenal. It's not about giving up or lacking ambition. It's about achieving a state of mind where every outcome serves your purpose, where defeat becomes as valuable as victory, where you literally cannot lose because you've redefined what losing means. Epictetus taught his students a principle that seems to defy logic. Demand not that events should happen as you wish, but wish them to happen as they do happen, and you will go on well. This isn't passive resignation. It's active acceptance that transforms every experience into exactly what you need. It's the ultimate power move disguised as surrender. Let's start with a scenario that terrifies most people: public humiliation. You're giving a presentation and everything goes wrong. Your technology fails, you forget key points, someone in the audience challenges you aggressively, and you stumble through your responses. By conventional standards, you've lost. But what if you wanted this to happen? If you approach that presentation wanting to either succeed brilliantly or fail spectacularly because both outcomes teach you something valuable, then you've removed failure from the equation. Success teaches you what works. Failure teaches you what doesn't. Both are information. Both make you stronger. Both are victories if you choose to see them that way. Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic emperor, took this principle to its logical extreme. He would begin each day imagining everything that could go wrong: betrayal by friends, failure in his duties, physical pain, public criticism. But instead of fearing these possibilities, he welcomed them as opportunities to practice virtue. If they happened, he was prepared. If they didn't, he enjoyed a pleasant surprise. Either way, he won. This approach completely reverses the normal relationship with failure. Most people spend enormous energy trying to avoid failure, which paradoxically makes them more likely to fail. They're like a tightrope walker looking down, wobbling with fear of falling. But when you genuinely welcome falling as an interesting experience, your balance improves. The fear disappears. You walk with confidence because you've removed the threat. Let me give you a concrete example from modern life. Tom, a salesman in Denver, was paralyzed by fear of rejection. Every no felt like a personal attack. His fear of hearing no made him tentative in his pitches, which led to more rejections, which increased his fear. It was a death spiral, destroying his career. Then Tom learned about this Stoic principle and decided to experiment. For 1 week, he would try to get rejected. His goal each day was to hear no at least 10 times. He wanted to lose. He pursued rejection like other salespeople pursue sales. Something remarkable happened. First, the fear vanished. How can you fear what you're actively seeking? Second, his approach became bold and authentic because he wasn't desperately trying to avoid rejection. Third, his sales increased dramatically. Why? Because when Tom stopped fearing rejection, he stopped acting from fear. His presentations became confident and natural. He asked for bigger deals because he wasn't afraid of hearing no. By wanting to lose, he couldn't lose. Every no was a victory because it's what he wanted. Every yes was a victory because it meant a sale. He had hacked the game of life. This principle applies to every area where fear of failure holds us back. Afraid of romantic rejection? Make rejection your goal. Approach people with the intention of being turned down. You'll either succeed at being rejected, which is what you wanted, or fail at being rejected by accidentally forming a connection, which is what you originally wanted. It's a win-win scenario you've created through paradox. Epictetus understood something profound about human psychology. We suffer more from the fear of suffering than from suffering itself. The anticipation of loss is worse than actual loss. The dread of failure is worse than actual failure. By wanting what we fear, we transform fear into anticipation, dread into curiosity, anxiety into excitement. Consider job interviews. Most people walk in desperate to be chosen, terrified of rejection. But imagine walking in genuinely curious about whether this is the right fit, equally happy to be rejected if it means avoiding a bad match. You're not trying to win their approval, you're gathering information. Rejection becomes as valuable as acceptance because it tells you this wasn't your path. The Stoics called this principle amor fati, love of fate, not just accepting what happens, but actively embracing it. When you truly want whatever happens to happen, you become invincible. The universe cannot defeat you because everything it sends your way is exactly what you ordered. This doesn't mean becoming indifferent or careless. Seneca, another great Stoic, was incredibly wealthy and successful. He didn't achieve that by not caring. He achieved it by caring about the right things, his effort, his integrity, his wisdom. The outcomes? Those he welcomed equally, knowing that both success and failure in external matters were opportunities for internal growth. A comedian friend in Los Angeles told me how this principle transformed his career. Early on, he was terrified of bombing on stage. The fear made him stiff and careful, which made bombing more likely. Then he decided to want to bomb. He went on stage hoping to fail spectacularly because that would give him great stories and thick skin. The paradox? He rarely bombed after that. And when he did, he laughed about it and learned from it. The deeper wisdom here is that when you want to lose, you've already won the only game that matters. The game of inner peace. External victories and defeats become like weather. Sometimes sunny, sometimes stormy, always temporary, never touching your core. Epictetus taught that this principle works because it aligns your desires with reality. Reality includes both success and failure, victory and defeat, acceptance and rejection. By wanting only success, you put yourself at odds with half of reality. By wanting both success and failure for different reasons, you align yourself with all of reality. This isn't about lowering your standards or giving up on excellence. It's about pursuing excellence while remaining unattached to specific outcomes. You give your best effort because that's who you are, not because you need a particular result. You compete fiercely while remaining internally at peace. Ultimately, wanting to lose is about recognizing that every experience has value if you're wise enough to extract it. Failure teaches resilience. Rejection teaches self-reliance. Defeat teaches humility. These lessons are as valuable as any trophy. When you understand this, you stop running from failure and start dancing with it. And in that dance, you discover that you've become unstoppable, not because you always win, but because you can no longer lose. This powerful realization opens the door to transforming our deepest fears into our greatest strengths. 6. Turn your biggest fear into your secret weapon. Your biggest fear holds the key to your greatest power. This isn't motivational fluff. It's a practical philosophy that Marcus Aurelius used to govern an empire, that Seneca used to face exile, and that Epictetus taught to transform slaves into philosophers. The Stoics discovered that our fears, when properly understood and approached, become the very tools that make us invincible. Consider what you fear most: public speaking, rejection, failure, financial ruin. Whatever it is that fear currently owns you, it dictates your choices, limits your actions, and shrinks your life. But the Stoics found a way to reverse this relationship entirely. Instead of being owned by fear, you can own it. Instead of running from it, you can run toward it. Instead of letting it weaken you, you can let it strengthen you. Marcus Aurelius, the most powerful man in the world, practiced this principle daily. Each morning, he would contemplate everything that could go wrong, not to torture himself, but to prepare himself. He wrote in his personal journal, "What stands in the way becomes the way." When plague struck Rome, when his generals betrayed him, when his own son disappointed him, he didn't see obstacles. He saw training equipment for his character. The technique is deceptively simple but psychologically profound. Take your fear and mentally rehearse facing it until it loses its power. But here's the Stoic twist. Don't just imagine surviving your fear, imagine thriving because of it. Transform it from an enemy into a teacher, from a weakness into a weapon. Let me share a modern example that brings this ancient wisdom to life. Jennifer, a marketing executive in Boston, had a paralyzing fear of public criticism. This fear was destroying her career. She wouldn't share ideas in meetings, wouldn't put her name on bold proposals, and wouldn't take visible leadership roles. She was brilliant but invisible, all because she feared judgment. Then Jennifer discovered Marcus Aurelius's approach to fear. Instead of avoiding criticism, she decided to seek it out. She started a blog sharing her most controversial marketing ideas. She volunteered to present at conferences. She actively asked for harsh feedback. But here's the key. She didn't do this to become immune to criticism. She did it to become strengthened by criticism. Each piece of negative feedback became data for improvement. Each harsh comment became an opportunity to practice emotional resilience. Each public failure became a story that made her more relatable to others. Within a year, what had been her greatest fear, public criticism, had become her greatest asset. Companies started headhunting her specifically because she had turned her vulnerability into a superpower. This transformation follows a pattern the Stoics understood deeply. First, you identify what you fear. Second, you move toward it instead of away from it. Third, you reframe it as something beneficial. Fourth, you practice facing it until it becomes familiar. Fifth, you discover that what you feared was actually what you needed to become who you're meant to be. Marcus Aurelius applied this to the ultimate fear, death. Instead of avoiding thoughts of mortality, he contemplated it daily. Not morbidly, but practically. He would remind himself that he could die today, and therefore should live fully. This practice, called premeditatio malorum, turned his fears into tools for gratitude and presence. The modern application is everywhere. Afraid of poverty? Practice voluntary simplicity. Live on rice and beans for a week. Shop at thrift stores. Take public transportation. Not to punish yourself, but to discover that what you fear isn't as terrible as your imagination makes it. You might even find freedom in simplicity that wealth never provided. Afraid of being alone? Spend deliberate time in solitude. Take yourself to dinner. Travel solo. Sit with yourself without distraction. You'll discover that the person you're afraid to be alone with yourself is actually pretty good company. The fear of solitude transforms into appreciation for self-reliance. Seneca, one of Rome's wealthiest men, regularly practiced poverty to overcome his fear of losing his fortune. He would spend days living like a beggar, sleeping on the floor, eating simple food. Then he would ask himself, "Is this what I feared?" The answer was always no. This practice freed him to take business risks others wouldn't dare, knowing that even if he lost everything, he'd be fine. The psychological mechanism here is profound. Fear gains its power from the unknown. When you make the unknown known, when you face the fear directly, it shrinks to its actual size, which is almost always smaller than its shadow. By voluntarily facing what you fear, you transform from victim to volunteer. This principle extends to emotional fears as well. Afraid of vulnerability? Practice sharing something personal with a trusted friend. Afraid of conflict? Have that difficult conversation you've been avoiding. Each time you face these fears, you don't just survive them, you harvest their power. The Stoics understood that every fear contains its own antidote. Fear of death teaches us to value life. Fear of loss teaches us appreciation. Fear of judgment develops internal validation. Fear of failure builds resilience. When you understand this, fears stop being problems and start being teachers. But here's what separates Stoic philosophy from mere exposure therapy. You don't just face your fears to overcome them. You face them to transform them into strengths. A boxer doesn't just learn to take punches. They learn to use their opponent's force against them. Similarly, a Stoic doesn't just endure what they fear. They find ways to benefit from it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way." Your biggest fear isn't your biggest weakness. It's your biggest opportunity. It's showing you exactly where you need to grow. The practical steps are clear. First, identify your biggest fear honestly. Second, ask yourself how facing this fear could make you stronger. Third, design small, voluntary exposures to that fear. Fourth, look for hidden benefits in what you fear. Fifth, gradually increase exposure until the fear transforms from master to servant. Therefore, your fears are not your enemies. They're your personal trainers, showing you exactly where you need to develop strength. When you stop running from them and start training with them, you discover that what you feared most becomes the source of your greatest power. This transformation from fear to strength leads perfectly into our final exploration of how real people have used these principles to achieve extraordinary results. 7. Real life wins from people who stop trying to win. The principles we've explored aren't just ancient philosophy. They're being lived out right now by people who've discovered that the path to success runs directly through the territory of not needing it. These modern Stoics have proven that when you stop trying to win in the conventional sense, you often end up winning in ways you never imagined. Take Michael, a tech entrepreneur from San Francisco who built and lost 2 companies trying to beat his competitors. He was obsessed with market share, funding rounds, and crushing rival startups. The stress was killing him, literally. At 35, he had his first heart episode. Lying in that hospital bed, he discovered Seneca's writings about wealth and ambition. Michael decided to try something radical for his 3rd company. Instead of trying to win the startup game, he would focus solely on creating value for users. No competitive analysis. No obsessing over what others were doing. Just solving real problems for real people. He even started sharing his code and insights publicly, helping potential competitors succeed. The result? His company grew organically to $50 million in revenue without taking venture capital. More importantly, Michael's health recovered, his relationships improved, and he rediscovered joy in his work. By stopping the race to win, he ended up winning the race he didn't know he was running, the race to build a meaningful life. Then there's Sarah, a lawyer from Chicago who transformed her practice using Epictetus's principles. For years, she approached every case like a gladiator entering the arena, desperate to destroy opposing counsel and win at all costs. This mentality was burning her out and limiting her success. After discovering Stoic philosophy, Sarah revolutionized her approach. She stopped seeing opposing lawyers as enemies and started seeing them as collaborators in finding justice. She stopped trying to win every battle and started focusing on achieving the best outcome for her clients, even if that meant settling. She began each case by asking, "What would happen if I wanted to lose this argument?" Often, this revealed creative solutions that benefited everyone. Her colleagues thought she'd lost her edge. Instead, she became known as the lawyer who could solve impossible cases. Judges respected her. Opposing counsel trusted her. Clients flocked to her because she delivered results without the usual drama. By stopping trying to win traditionally, she won the reputation and success that had eluded her for years. Consider James, a professional poker player from Las Vegas who credits Marcus Aurelius with revolutionizing his game. For years, James was plagued by tilt, letting emotions affect decisions. Every bad beat sent him spiraling. He was trying so hard to win every hand that he was losing the long game. Then James encountered Marcus Aurelius's concept of the view from above. Imagining yourself from a cosmic perspective, he started applying this to poker. Before each session, he would remind himself that he was just moving chips around a table. Win or lose, his worth as a person remained unchanged. This shift was transformative. James stopped trying to win every hand and started trying to make the best decision every hand. He stopped getting emotional about bad beats because he genuinely didn't care about individual outcomes. Within a year, he went from struggling to playing high stakes. By wanting to lose as much as win, he became unreadable and unbeatable. Even in athletics, where winning seems paramount, these principles apply. Maria, a marathon runner from Denver, spent years frustrated by her inability to break 3 hours. The harder she tried, the more she tensed up during races. Then Maria read about the Stoic concept of preferred indifference, things we can prefer but shouldn't need. She decided to make breaking 3 hours a preference, not a need. She trained just as hard but changed her race mentality. Instead of running to beat the clock, she ran to execute her plan perfectly. Her first race with this mindset, she ran 2:58. Not because she tried harder, but because she tried differently. Without the pressure of needing to hit a time, her body relaxed, her form improved, and her mind stayed calm. She won by stopping trying to win. These stories echo what Seneca discovered in his own life. When Emperor Claudius exiled him, he could have seen it as the ultimate loss. Instead, he chose to see it as an opportunity. He wrote some of his best philosophical works in exile. He discovered that what he thought was a loss was actually a gift. When Seneca returned to Rome as advisor to Nero, he brought this wisdom with him. He engaged with power without needing it. He accumulated wealth without attachment. This made him more effective, not less. When you don't need to win, you make better decisions. When you're not afraid to lose, you take appropriate risks. The pattern is clear. Whether in business, law, poker, athletics, or life itself, the people who achieve the most are often those who need it the least. They participate fully but hold outcomes lightly. They compete fiercely but remain internally peaceful. This isn't about lowering standards or accepting mediocrity. Michael's company didn't succeed because he lowered his standards. It succeeded because he raised them from beating competitors to creating value. Sarah became a better lawyer by collaborating. James played more precise poker. Maria trained more intelligently. What these modern Stoics discovered is what Epictetus taught 2,000 years ago. When you align yourself with virtue rather than victory, when you focus on process rather than outcome, when you compete with yourself rather than others, you tap into a power that external competition can never provide. The beauty of these principles is that they work in any field at any level. Whether you're a student facing exams, a parent dealing with teenagers, or anyone navigating life's challenges, the principle remains. Stop trying to win and discover you've already won. Ultimately, these real-life examples prove that Stoic philosophy isn't just ancient wisdom gathering dust. It's a living approach that transforms how we engage with challenge, competition, and success itself. The question isn't whether these principles work. These stories prove they do. The question is, are you ready to stop trying to win and discover what real victory looks like? Your new invincible mindset starts now. We've journeyed through ancient wisdom and modern applications, from trembling musicians to fearless philosophers, from anxious kings to unstoppable entrepreneurs. The message is clear. You already have everything you need to never lose again. Not because you'll always get the outcome you want, but because you'll want the outcome you get. This isn't just philosophy, it's your new superpower. Remember where we started. You were trapped in the binary prison of win or lose, success or failure, acceptance or rejection. Every competition was a threat to your happiness. Every challenge carried the weight of potential defeat. But now you see the truth. That prison only existed in your mind. The door was always open. You just needed the Stoic key to walk through it. The principles we've explored aren't just ideas to think about, they're tools to use immediately. Tomorrow morning, when you face your first challenge, you have a choice. You can approach it the old way, desperate to win, terrified to lose, letting external outcomes control your internal state. Or you can approach it as a Stoic, focused on what you control, welcoming whatever happens, transforming every outcome into a victory. Start small. Pick one area where fear of losing has been holding you back. Maybe it's that conversation you've been avoiding, that project you're afraid to start, that person you're hesitant to approach. Apply what you've learned. Want the rejection as much as the acceptance. Seek the failure as much as the success. Focus on your effort, not the outcome. Watch what happens when you remove the fear of losing. You'll discover you've already won. This isn't about becoming passive or indifferent. It's about becoming powerful in the only way that matters, internally. When you no longer need external validation, you become free to pursue excellence for its own sake. When you no longer fear failure, you become free to take the risks that lead to breakthrough success. When you no longer need to beat others, you become free to fulfill your true potential. The ancient Stoics didn't develop these principles in comfortable academies. They forged them in the crucible of real life, facing exile, poverty, slavery, and death. They proved that these principles work not just in good times, but especially in hard times. Whatever you're facing right now, whatever challenges await you tomorrow, you now have the tools to transform them from threats into opportunities. If this video has opened your eyes to a new way of living, if you're ready to develop this invincible mindset, then you're exactly who the Stoic Vivu channel is for. We're building a community of modern Stoics who refuse to let external circumstances dictate their internal peace. Hit that subscribe button and join thousands of others who are discovering that ancient wisdom is the most practical tool for modern life. Like this video if it's changed how you think about winning and losing. Share it with someone who needs to hear this message, someone trapped in the fear of failure, someone exhausting themselves trying to win at everything, someone who needs to discover that they're already complete. Leave a comment about which principle resonated most with you. Your story might be exactly what another viewer needs to hear. Remember, your new invincible mindset starts now. Not tomorrow, not when circumstances are perfect, not when you feel ready. Now, because the Stoics taught us that the present moment is all we ever have, and it's always enough. You don't need to win. You just need to show up, give your best, and trust that whatever happens is exactly what needs to happen for your growth. Proceed to your new life, where losing is impossible because you've redefined what winning means. Welcome to the freedom that comes from needing nothing external for your peace. Your journey to invincibility begins with your very next choice.